Hey, Vlad here, devinsidey.com. Welcome to another video. In the previous video, we learned about property-based testing, and today we're going to see how seamlessly you can integrate ScalaCheck into your already existing ScalaTest project. And in fact, we will also see how in the future, ScalaTest will not need ScalaCheck at all. Let's do this. All right, so there are 4 different ways to integrate these 2 wonderful testing frameworks. Number 1, there is no need to integrate anything at all. SBT is happy running multiple test frameworks at the same time. Number 2, you can almost literally copy-paste ScalaCheck style properties into ScalaTest. Number 3, instead of simply copy-pasting them, you can rewrite them a little bit so that they feel a bit more like ScalaTest. Number 4, in the near future, and in fact, the near future might have arrived by the time you're actually watching this video, since ScalaTest 3.1, which at the time of recording is not released yet, ScalaTest will have its own generators, and then it will not need ScalaCheck at all. All right, way less talking than in the previous video. Let's get right to it. As always, we're in the Ubuntu virtual machine, and usually I have Sublime Text already open, but this time we're actually going to start with cloning the credit card project that we created in the beginning of the Homegrown collection series. So I'm going to open my browser, and I'm going to go to devinsidey, github.com/devinsidey, credit card generator and validator. I'm just going to copy that. If you haven't watched it, it's a really simple project. I'm going to walk you right through it, don't worry. So I'm just going to go into my terminal. I'm going to go into my dev folder. I'm going to say git clone, paste it over here, right? So let's do that. I don't think that it was right. Oh, it was. All right, cool. So it's going to clone it in just a few seconds. There we go. All right, so let's go into the credit card folder, and I can do subl. And it will open Sublime. It will open the previous project and this project. So this is the previous project, the one from the previous video. So I'm just going to have the credit card generator over here. Okay, so let me also show the sidebar, and I can do that so that we can start compiling it already. Let's just do SBT clean test while I walk you through the project. So we can go into, we should probably start with project build properties. Okay, let's start it over here. I want it over there. So we're still using SBT 0.13.6 plugins. Let's see. Oh, we have the super safe plugin. We don't really care about that. We have the coverage. We don't really care about that either. We actually don't have Scalariform. Maybe we should add Scalariform. Yeah, let's add Scalariform. Actually, I just decided. In fact, I'm gonna just go and create a file over here and call it scalariform.sbt. And, or in fact, you know what? We can just copy it. Where is it? It's over here. Delete file. So let me just open the terminal. I can actually open it over here. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy from the previous video. So there was a scalariform.sbt just into dot. Okay, and also I'm not gonna open it like this. I'm going to open the ScalaCheck crash course project plugins. Right, I'm just going to copy this line with Scalariform, so you can go over here, Scalariform. There we go. Okay, like this. So we can close that one, and yeah, I believe that's actually all we need to do. Let's go into SBT again over here. All right, let's also go into the build property, not the build properties, into the build. Okay, so what do we have here? Just a version, organization, Scala version. We're in 2.12.4. We could switch to 2.12.8. It doesn't really matter. We're clearing the output of the console every time we're triggering continuous compilation. We're using ScalaTest. We're using packdown. Oh, we're using packdown. Oh yeah, we were generating test reports back then. All right. So actually, in fact, we can start by adding ScalaCheck right away, as we have learned in the previous video. Just gonna take that. I go over here. Go add it over here. We don't need that. We don't need that. So just have ScalaCheck like that. And maybe let's format that a little bit like this, like that, like that. Okay. So we have over here, we have the packdown. In fact, it should be like this. Okay, so we have back down, which is just a Java dependency, so we need only one percentage symbol. Like that. Okay, so we have 3 test dependencies. All right, what else? That's actually pretty much it. Let's reload the project. Let's run the tests again. Let's just do this continuous running of the tests like this. ScalaReform parser. Oh yeah, so this is one of the reasons like ScalaReform is a little bit outdated. So since Scala 2.12, it is possible to have a trailing comma if you have a multi-line creation of a list or call of a method, and ScalaReform doesn't know how to deal with that. So if you go into main, and it says that the token 884. So if I press Ctrl G and add another column, so we have 2 columns, and I go to 884, then I see, okay, so we're creating a set. So probably at the bottom there's a trailing comma over here. So now this warning is not going to be produced anymore. There we go, no warning. In case you haven't watched that video, we basically have the credit card file, which is a sealed trait, and we have an object credit card, right? And an object credit card, we can create a valid credit card every time by just calling the apply method. So if you specify the number, it might end up being invalid. But if we don't specify the number, so if we call this apply one, then it will generate a valid credit card. Okay, and over here in the test, we don't have many tests. We have like six tests or so. A credit card without passing any number should generate a valid credit card. Creating a card without passing any number should create a card of class credit card valid, and so on and so on and so on. In fact, in the beginning, we're actually not gonna touch the credit card. We're gonna see the different ways of integrating ScalaCheck into ScalaTest with the basic example from the website. Okay, so in fact, let's go over here, and I'm gonna create a file. I'm gonna call it ScalaCheck Suite. Okay, so this is going to be the initial ScalaCheck suite, the one that we know from the previous video. If you haven't watched it, you probably should. So I'm just going to copy that, throw that in there, and ScalaReform is going to format it a little bit probably. And in fact, I'm going to press enter over here and do this. And I'm going to do also format off and format on, so that ScalaReform leaves this thing alone. Okay, let me create a little bit more space. In fact, let me also close all the other tabs like this. All right, so what we see here is that SBT says that we ran 9 tests in total, and 1 of the tests failed and 8 of them passed. Now over here we see that all the tests passed, and this is the output not of SBT, but this is the output of ScalaTest. So ScalaTest says, okay, we had 6 tests and all of them succeeded, right? So we ran 6 tests, all of them succeeded. So if we scroll up a little bit over here, we actually see the ScalaCheck results, right? And if you remember from the previous video, this property actually fails. So you see the regular ScalaCheck output. So SBT is fine was running both the ScalaCheck and ScalaTest. Unfortunately, the output is sometimes mixed up. So for example, you see the output of ScalaTest over here, and then you see the result. In fact, I believe in this case, it's actually not mixed up. You see the output of all the tests. So you see the ScalaCheck first, then you see ScalaTest output, probably alphabetically sorted. Then you see the summary of ScalaCheck, which is over here. I'm sorry, over here. Right? And then you see the summary of ScalaTest, which is over here. It's a bit longer. Now let me scroll down, and we can also do, we can fix it like this. Also, let me fix the imports, because usually I import it like this and like that. So now we see that all of the tests passed. We see that ScalaCheck passed the 3 tests, ScalaTest passed the 6 tests, and SBT is happily reporting that all the 9 tests were passed. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back to the sidebar, and we're going to create the step 2 integration, right? So this is going to be called, I'm going to call it ScalaCheck and then ScalaTest. ScalaTest suite.scala, like this. And what we're going to do is we're going just to take the entire thing and just paste it over here. Okay, and now we're going to change it a little bit. Let me create a bit more space like this. The most important thing is to change this object to a class. We're going to change this to a class. We're going to call this string specification 2. We also don't need to extend property string, because instead we're going to extend something that is coming from ScalaTest. So we're going to extend a thing called prop spec. And by the way, we also need to fix our imports. We actually don't need the import to ScalaCheck, but we still need the import to ScalaCheck prop. So we need ScalaTest over here, right? So prop spec is coming from ScalaTest. PropSpec is now bringing this method property. I'm not going to show it to you, but basically property is actually just a current function. So in ScalaCheck, we would use this weird magic update syntax in Scala, but in ScalaTest, the property method is just a current function. So in fact, everywhere where we say equals for all, we can just go and replace this equals for all with the curly brace opening, and at the bottom, curly brace closing. I did it wrong, I think. Hold up, let me manually do this like that. Let me actually press enter over here, another curly brace over here, another curly brace over here. Now I'm going to fix all the tests first, and then I'm going to let ScalaReform see if ScalaReform is happy. In fact, let's see if it's already happy. Yeah, so it compiles, but all the tests are passing. And in fact, if we do, hold up, let me do that. If I do this, right, this test should fail, but you're going to see that it's actually not going to fail. ScalaTest is built in such a way that the test has to throw an exception if it fails. This is not how ScalaCheck works. What we need to do is we need to wrap these calls to for all into a call to check. Now, ScalaCheck has a method called check, but this one is actually not from ScalaCheck. This is from ScalaTest, right? So everywhere we just need to wrap this in check like this. Whoops, accidentally pressed on insert. So like this. So we get the check, goes down over here. This one as well, check, goes down over here, curly brace. And this check method is coming from the trait called checkers. And this trait called checkers is coming from ScalaTest and is looking exactly like this one, ScalaTest dot prop like this. So the P is small. So we have it like that, and we have it like that. Okay, so the for all method is still coming from ScalaCheck. The check method is coming from ScalaTest from checkers, and the property is coming from PropSpec from ScalaTest. So now if I save it, everything is going to compile, but this test will actually fail. But it is already failing with the ScalaTest rendering of error messages. So now we're starting to have a bit more of a tight integration into ScalaTest. So the cost is still a bit high, right? We have to have this check method now all of a sudden, but at least we get some value. So the report is looking a bit closer to ScalaTest, right? But we still see, you know, arg0 was empty, arg1 was empty, and yeah, this is exactly what happened. Falsified after 0 successful property evaluation. So it's very, very similar. In fact, ScalaTest doesn't do anything magical there, because ScalaCheck is written in such a way that the test report can be accessed programmatically, and this is exactly what ScalaTest is doing in the check method, right? So it sees, okay, is it equals falsified or something, and then it produces this report. It throws an exception because it knows that ScalaTest wants an exception, and everything works fine. So in fact, if I fix this test like this, like that, what did I just do there? Equals like this. All right. By the way, why did it format it like this? Format off, format on. There you go. Oh, it formatted like this because I had a check and then it didn't format again. Okay, so everything passes the same as before. But what we also see, you see that the output, this is still the old one from ScalaCheck, and this is the new one. And the new one looks pretty much the same as ScalaTest, because all the reporting is now happening from ScalaTest. So in fact, I'm going to go and I'm going to comment out the entire previous one, and we're going to see that we have our 9 tests again, and you don't even see that ScalaCheck is involved, right? This is exactly what we want. All the 9 tests are reported by ScalaTest, which is, you know, a step forward, but it's still a bit inconvenient. All right, so let's go one step further. So we're going to go and we're going to create a file called, I'm going to start with ScalaTest this time, because now we're closer and closer to ScalaTest. So we have ScalaCheck suite, ScalaCheck ScalaTest suite. Now we're going to have ScalaTest ScalaCheck suite.scala. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to go over here, we're going to copy it, comment it out, save it, go over here, paste it, and then we're going to start refactoring it. All right, so the idea is to use ScalaCheck less and less and less. The only thing that is left from ScalaCheck is for all, right? Properties from ScalaTest, check is from ScalaTest, for all is the only thing from ScalaCheck. So the idea is to remove that and then to start using for all that is coming from ScalaTest. And because it's coming from ScalaTest, it will throw exceptions when it needs to. So we won't even need this check. So we can remove the check, right? Remove the check, remove the check, remove the check, and remove one of those curly braces. Okay, so now all we need to do is we don't need the checkers anymore, because this is where check is coming from. So instead, we're going to use property checks, and property checks brings for all. All right. Also, let's call it 3. Let's call it 3, like this. Okay. So as we can see, all the tests are passing. Let's see what happens if we try to make this fail. And it doesn't fail, because what we also need to do is, because in property-based test in ScalaCheck, we were just returning a Boolean, and the Boolean was turned into a property, and then the property was false. If the Boolean was false and the property was false, and then the framework would know that the test failed. Over here, we need to throw an exception if the test failed, but this Boolean doesn't throw any exceptions. So what we need to do instead, we need to use the regular matchers that we already know and love from ScalaTest. So we're going to add matchers. I'm going to add matchers, and now instead of doing this, we're going to say A plus B should start with A, and we can remove this one. Okay, and now over here, instead of this, which is formatted wrong again, by the way, like that, I want to have it like that. Okay, so instead of this, we're going to say, okay, so A plus B, whoops, B dot length should be greater or equals, for now let's do or equals length. Okay, let's duplicate this line and now change it to B, like this. Okay, so now we don't need this one. And because we're redoing all of them, let's also do the last one. Last one is actually kind of simple. We just need to say should be B. Okay, and now if we break this one by removing the equals thing, by the way, I already mentioned this in the previous video, I'm using Fiora code, so it just renders some symbols beautifully like this, as you can see. Okay, let me save it again, and let me see the output. And the output is pretty much the same as before. So this is an even tighter integration. Let me actually create less space over here, more space at the top. So this thing now starts looking like proper Scala test. Okay, so it doesn't feel like ScalaCheck at all. Okay, like this. See, this is the entire code. Imports are coming only from ScalaTest. And by the way, compare them to ScalaCheck. Same thing, but the P is small. ScalaCheck, ScalaCheck prop, ScalaTest, ScalaTest prop, but the P is small. All right, so now it looks like we're not using ScalaCheck at all. But we actually do. Check this out. Check this out. If we go to the build file, and we remove ScalaCheck, and we go and reload, and we try to run our tests, what we see is, we see symbol term org ScalaCheck is missing from the class bus. The symbol is required by value org ScalaTest prop generator driven property checks gen and name A. Jesus. Okay. Make sure that the term ScalaCheck is in your class bus and check for conflicting dependencies with -y log class bus. A full rebuild may help if this class was compiled against an incompatible version of org. So sometimes SBT sort of chokes up, the Scala compiler chokes up, and this full rebuild is actually helping. But in our case, it is actually not going to help. So what's happening is that ScalaTest has a dependency on ScalaCheck. And usually, if you want to have something like this, you would extract the parts from ScalaTest that use ScalaCheck and create a different project. Right? You would call it ScalaTest-ScalaCheck. It will have both the dependency on the original ScalaTest and on the ScalaCheck. But this is a bit tedious to do. Sometimes it's not always straightforward. And by the way, don't even start with the world owes you shit attitude, because most of these projects, the one that I'm showing you, most of these wonderful frameworks, they've been created as open source projects. So people who maintain them, they don't get any money for that. So they do it in all of their free time. So be cool about this, okay? So another alternative to what you can do is, if you have such a big project and you don't have time to extract it properly, what you can do is you can depend on another jar optionally, and this is exactly what is happening in ScalaTest. First of all, let me revert that. Sorry, it's in the build file, which is over here. Let me revert that. Let me reload, and let's run the test again. And while it's running, let me go to my browser again over here, and I'm going to show this to you. Okay, so by the way, the ScalaCheck-Shapeless library that I showed you in the previous video is doing exactly that, right? So there's a project called ScalaCheck, there's a project called Shapeless, and now this is an integration of both of them. So you have ScalaCheck-Shapeless. It has both the dependencies on ScalaCheck and on Shapeless. So now let me click on this one, and what we see over here, this is the build file for ScalaTest, and what you see here, library dependencies plus equals ScalaCheck dependency optional, and this is just a method call to a method which is defined over here, ScalaCheck dependency. So you're passing a string, and the string is going to be used over here. Right, so it basically has a regular dependency on ScalaCheck, but over here, usually when we have, the symbol, the percent symbol and test, over here it says percent symbol and optional. And optional means that when you're working on ScalaTest, it will be there. When you're using ScalaTest and you're not using the places that use ScalaCheck, you don't need to have ScalaCheck on your class path. But if you do use those places, you just add it. Let me also show you that in the property checks. You have this trait called property checks, and it extends table-driven property checks and generator-driven property checks. So table-driven property checks, you can just basically say for all and just give it a list of items, right? You can say for all things in that list. In fact, we're doing this. In fact, we're doing this in. I'm sorry, this is the wrong VM. In fact, we're doing this if I open the credit card suite over here. We're calling at some point all, and this is exactly coming from those table-driven tests. So let me back over here. Right, so we have this table-driven property test and the generator-driven property checks. And the generator-driven property checks is the one that actually uses ScalaCheck. I want to show it to you, but it's going to be really, really tricky. So if I go over here, because this generator-driven property checks.scala is a file that doesn't exist in ScalaTest, it is being generated. Right, the file is like everything is being generated in the previous video and in this video, right? So as you can see, it is being assembled over here, and if I click over here, it's the same file, just a different line. This is where you see that this is where all the imports are coming from, right? Or ScalaCheck, right? So ScalaTest depends on ScalaCheck, but as I already mentioned, in the next version, in the ScalaTest 3.1, this dependency will go away because ScalaTest will have its own generators. All right, so let me finish showing you the integration. So if I open my VM again and we go to the last suite. So if you remember from the previous video, there was an let me close this one. Okay, so I want to see my tests, and I actually want to make them pass like that. Also, let's create some more space. Okay, so if you remember from the previous video, it was possible to do something like this. Property, I'm gonna call it whenever. There was a thing called implication, right? So you could say for all, and which is an int. Oops, I wanted to actually use the curly braces, and which is an int. Okay, so you could say something like if n is greater or equals to 0, and I'm sorry, and n is smaller than 10,000, then you could use this. This is 10. No, this is 10,000. You could use this implication arrow like this, right? And only then you could say, okay, then if I add them both together, then it will be greater than 0. Okay. So how you do this in ScalaTest is by using whenever. So instead of doing that, you just say whenever, and then you paste that in here, and you paste your test over here. So you say n plus n should be greater or equals to 0, like this. Okay, so this thing is not going to compile over here. Oops, this whenever should be inside. Hold up, this whenever should be inside. And this implication arrow thing doesn't exist, obviously. Okay, so yeah, so instead of this arrow, you use this whenever. In fact, I'm going to remove this test like this. All right, so the last thing I'm going to show you is that if I open the credit card suite, where we have the the regular example-based test, we're using fun suite, and we're calling test, and over here we're using propspec, and we're calling property. It turns out that you can't actually combine them, because if I try to say with fun suite over here, it's not going to work, because fun suite is a class and propspec is a class. So basically you have to decide on only one style. So in fact, what we're going to do is I'm going to revert that a bit. Okay, so instead of propspec, I'm just going to use fun suite, and instead of property, I'm going to use test, right? So basically now we can write the regular test, and sometimes we can use a property, and sometimes we can use the regular example-driven test, which I think is really awesome. And by the way, let me break the test again so that you're sure that the error message is still the same, right? So it still works exactly the same way. It's just a different style, right? So the error message is still the same. It says message 0 was not test failure. Oh, actually the message is a little bit different, a little bit. So you see, occurs when past generated values, right? But before we would actually see that it was falsified after something. So if I go back to I believe it was propspec, right? prop spec, right? And if instead of tests, I'm going to say property, the output is going to be a little bit different, I believe. I know, it looks the same. It looks the same. Okay, it's all good. It's all the same. All right, so let's go back. Fun suite. Okay, so I guess like in this stage of the integration, the error message changed a little bit, and I forgot to show you this. Okay, the next few things I'm going to show you are specific to ScalaTest. Now, because we're using the for all from ScalaTest, it looks a teeny bit different. So what you can also do is you can go over here. In fact, I'm going to go to the failing one. I'm going to go over here, and you can go and so it's overloaded a few more times. So you can specify the names for your variables. Right? For example, you can say A, and you can say B. Right, and now instead of this where it said arc0 arc1, we're actually going to see A and B, and obviously you can use whatever you want, right? You can use first and you can use second over here, right? And there's also another overload with hold up, where is it? First and second. There's also another overload where you can pass in generators together with labels. Let me actually show this to you. So we're going to actually import ScalaCheck again, import org.ScalaCheck. Right, so we have a gen for string. Let's just get the arbitrary one, arbitrary.string. And remember from the previous video, like I wish that this thing would be called generator. So I wish this would say arbitrary generator for string because the return type is a gen. Okay, so now you can use it over here like this. So you can basically create tuples, so you can mix and match them however you want. Right? Yeah. So we get exactly the same result. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to show you is I wanted to demonstrate. Let's actually revert this one. I wanted to show you how the upcoming integration would look like, and I didn't want to to type this whole thing out. So what I did was I cloned ScalaTest. It's open source, right? As I mentioned before, maintained by in the free time by Bill Venners and a few other people. So I have it in a different VM. So I cloned it, I published it locally. So this is a tiny project where you see we're using ScalaTest 3.1. I call it ScalaTest 3.1. We're using SBT 1.2.8. Plugins is just Scala with the same settings. And we have in the build file, I'm using the version 3.1.0 snap 8 that I published locally. Maybe it's actually published to me, and I didn't actually bother. Okay, so now in the test suite, it looks pretty much the same. We have the same imports. It looks exactly the same as before. But now the generators that for all is using are not coming from ScalaCheck. You still can use the one from ScalaCheck, but I believe this would be extracted out properly. So there will be probably a jar called ScalaTest-ScalaCheck, right? The thing that changes, gen is now called generator, and you can actually use it implicitly, right? So if you have this, you can just mark it implicit, and you don't need arbitraries anymore, and it would be picked up over here. I believe this is all I wanted to show you in here. Let's go back to this VM. All right, so all that is left to do is actually to write a few credit card tests. So let me actually comment out all of these, and let's go to credit card suite, and let's go and say that we want fun suite with matchers and with property checks. Okay, checks. Like this, and we also want to have ScalaCheck like this, and we also want to have prop like this. Okay, so let's see if it compiles. It should compiles, right? What 1009? Really? What happened there? Fake cards. Oh, this one as well. Okay, there we go. Okay, I thought I removed it before. Didn't I remove it before? Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we have only our 6 tests from the credit card project. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to realize that we actually already have a generator for valid credit cards. So we can just go over here and we can say, okay, so gen valid is going to be a gen of credit card like this, and it's going to be an arbitrary of arbitrary unit. And by the way, I have no idea how to generate this this generator, so I played around and I believe that this is the best way to do this. So we're just going to do this, and we can map it to whatever comes in to just please generate a credit card for us. Okay, so now we have this gen valid, and now we can also have an arbitrary implicit val arbitrary valid, which is an arbitrary of credit card dot valid this time. Okay, so we're going to have an arbitrary of gen valid map to as instance of credit card dot valid, and this would throw an exception if this is an invalid card, but if it's thrown an exception, it means that we have a bug. So it's all cool. So so now what we need to do is we need to change this test to use properties to use this arbitrary valid that will actually test this as instance of, basically. Okay, so what we do is we're going to go, I'm going to say for all valid card, which is a credit card dot valid. If we take the valid card and we call is valid, it should be true, right? So it's basically exactly the same as this one, which we can remove now, right? But now it generated a bunch of tests, okay, which is super cool. Let's look at the next one. Okay, this one just checks the type, and we're already checking the type over here, right? So we basically can just remove this test. All right, let's look at the next one. So it says creating a card manually by passing a valid number should produce a valid credit card. Oh, okay. So what we can do is we can wrap this entire thing into a for all. Same thing as before. In fact, I'm going to do this. So now I can just paste that over here, close it down there, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this call, right, like this, right? So it's super simple because we were already generating credit card numbers, so we were already doing it like property based style a little bit, but we were running like only one test instead of like hundreds over here. Let's look at the next one. Okay, let's see. Credit cards to string method should mention validity. Okay, so this one is invalid, and we already have we only have a generator for the valid card, so we're going to leave this one alone, but this one we can actually fix was the same way as we did before. I thought it would paste that thing, copy, paste it over here, go down over here. Okay, so I'm just going to use valid card over here, right? So now I generated 100 valid cards, and all of the toString method, they don't include the word invalid. All right, so this one is the one where we generated a bunch of fake cards. Okay, and then we use the all method from ScalaTest, which is very similar. So now instead, because this is a ScalaTest ScalaCheck Integration video, we're going to do the gen style. So we're going to have a gen, which is a gen of credit card equals gen one of fake valid cards, like this. Okay, so I believe this should be a sequence actually. Let's just see. Okay, so now instead of all, we're going to say for all. Let me actually copy that. Same as before, for all, like this. Where is it? Over here. So we're going to have for all. And what we're doing inside of for all, we're going to say valid card is valid, should be true. Okay, so now we actually don't need this one. And I believe this is not going to work because we're using a set and we actually need a sequence. Over here, sequence. Hold on, not found fake valid cards. I'm gonna call it fake valid cards. Hold on, let's change it back to a set. I don't think that it's gonna work with a set. Hold up. Yeah, it doesn't work with a set. It wants a sequence. Okay. So you give it a sequence, and it just works, right? So the same as before. And the last test, actually we don't need it because the last test was essentially generating 10,000 cards and make sure that they were valid, but we're doing this all the time now. So let's remove this and we're done. So now instead of 6 tests, we have 4. And it's, in fact, if I say 4, I actually mean 400 because this is what ScalaTest is generating. So now let me remove all the files that we generated today. This one, I'm going to delete it. This one, I'm going to delete it. And this one, I'm going to delete it. Okay, because what I want to do is I want to commit that. So I'm just going to go over here. I'm going to add all the files. I'm going to commit -am. I'm going to say ScalaCheck like this, and I'm just going to push. All right. There we go. By the way, I sort of got tired of this output. Let's do push default. This message adopts a new behavior and now use. Yeah, let's do this one. Just gonna paste that in. I believe from now on the output is gonna be better. All right. So let's actually go and see. It's over here. So if I click on commits, there's this one now, ScalaCheck. And this is what we did, right? So we added ScalaCheck, we added ScalaReform, and we changed a few tests like this. Okay. So so this was ScalaReform. ScalaReform changed the credit card a lot, right? A lot. And now we have ScalaTest. That's unfortunate that I added Scala form, because now you don't see the changes, because there's probably a lot of formatting involved here as well. Well, yeah, whatever. All right, so I was initially planning to also go back to the Homegrown collection series and start to use property-based driven tests over there, but I believe that this video is already getting way too long, so I'm not going to do this. Maybe we're going to do this some other time, or maybe I'm just going to squeeze it into one of the upcoming videos. I'm not really sure yet. I guess this is all that I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. This is the integration of ScalaCheck into ScalaTest, and in the upcoming version, which might already be out actually, you won't even need ScalaCheck from ScalaTest. And yeah, that's all. It's been Vlad, devinside.com. Like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you, and if you find my videos valuable, consider supporting me on Patreon, and most importantly, take care.